check, good. So I'm Max Ceron, Max Ceron, CWB Association Welding Podcast. Today we have a really cool guest, Welding Podcast.
The show is about to begin.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the CWB Association podcast. My name is Max Ceron, and once again we have another guest with us, and this one comes from Ontario, Local 721, Ironworker Jennifer Muma. Jennifer, how are you today?
Good. How are you?
Good, and I'm excited to have an apprentice from the 721 local. I worked for 771 here in Regina for a while. When I was younger, I did a lot of ironworker work, and then I would do permits for ironworking in the summer when I was teaching to make some extra cash. So I have a soft spot in my heart for ironworkers.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So Jennifer, let's talk about where you are. Where are you sitting right now? You look like you're in a boardroom. So
Yeah, I'm inside the 721 building, like their hall. So I am upstairs in their boardroom. Everyone's gone for the day, so figure this would be a nice quiet spot, and that's where I am right now.
good. So Jennifer, how far along are you in your apprenticeship? What is it that you do with the ironworkers?
So I am little bit over a year into my apprenticeship. I started last end of April. I got signed on as an apprentice in September, I believe. And yeah, I'm just 70% apprentice right now, and do welding, do everything that a lot, erecting, steel erecting, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
on-site fabricating sometimes. A lot. Yeah, it's ironwork. It's
Just a little bit of everything.
a little bit of everything. Yeah, I'm still pretty new into the apprenticeship, so not too far along. But
Okay, so before we'll get into the ironworker side in a bit because I have some questions because I know how it works. But before you became an ironworker, were you already welding or were you already in the steel trades? What were you doing before you got into the IW?
so before ironworking, moving backwards, I was working in a shop. I did a little bit of welding, like with MIG, and I was
Mhm.
doing truck trailers there. I was there for a few months. For that, I was working in a fabrication shop. I was doing things like finishing, so grinding, stuff like that. Um, right before that, I went to Humber and I did a welding course there. So that was where I started with welding. Before that, I was in university, so that was way off track with welding fabrication. Um, but yeah, I've done some work like welding in shop. It wasn't until I became an iron worker that I started more with stick welding and all that.
Yeah, mainly MIG. Well, you had the right idea. Let's rewind. Let's go right to the start. So, like, where were you born?
I was born here in Ontario.
So, like, you live just outside of Ontario or outside of
No,
Toronto? I mean,
I live in Etobicoke. I live close to the hall, actually.
okay,
I'm not very far out. Yeah.
and that's where you were born and raised, is right in that area.
Yeah, haven't left the area since
So
been here.
then you're growing up in Ontario, right? Southern Ontario. Um, what made little baby Jennifer decide that she wanted to play with steel?
So I went to university. It was more like a parental influence, and that was
Hmm.
where I went. I spent 4 years there doing a bachelor's at U of T for psychology. I
Okay.
graduated there, and I didn't really have that motivation to continue with a master's. Um, I also didn't have the grades, and just how time consuming it was, and financially it was really expensive. Once I graduated from UFT, I kind of found myself in a spot where I was like, I don't really know what I want to do with my life. I don't know where it's heading. I took some time off, and there was something about construction that I really, really liked, and it was really interesting. So I started looking on the Ontario Trades website and all the different trades they had. There was something about welding that I really, really liked, and ironworking. Something about big steel. And I don't
Hmm.
know what it was, but there was just this pull that I had. So I decided to enroll for a welding course at Humber.
Hmm.
And that was probably my first time ever picking up welding rods, stinger, anything like that. And yeah, from there, it was ironworking that I wanted to do. So it was a little bit of a journey to get from there to ironworking.
Hmm.
But yeah, there was something about steel that I just really liked more so than anything else.
So you go to university for 4 years, and psychology is a tough one. I went for philosophy. It's also a tough one because you can't do anything unless you have a master's.
Or
It's like, yeah, or a PhD. So it's like, oh, great, you got an undergrad. It means nothing. I mean,
it's
I shouldn't say that for the people that are watching the show with university degrees. I mean, you can get like the generic arts, degree jobs or whatever.
yeah.
But if you want to work as a psychologist, you need to have at least a master's to even get a foot in the door,
Yes.
right?
On top of that, you have to do, your PhD research and spend all of this time maybe doing training. And I would have been done probably by the time I was 30, mid 30s. And it's just I didn't see my life going that way. So yeah,
So,
it's definitely different.
yeah, and then you finish school and you're looking around thinking, what am I going to do? You say that big steel attracted you. So, but how did that get in front of you? Like, how did you see it? What was it that just put it in front of your line of sight at all?
I don't even know how to describe it. I just remember going through there was something about steel that I really liked. Welding just looked cool. I was like,
Hmm.
oh, fire, sparks. I don't know. It sounds doesn't
It's
really sound right.
badass. Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, it's so
Yeah.
cool. So there was something about welding, but when I looked into ironworking, I mean, when you search ironworking on the internet, you see structural. You see, the big iron,
Tall
you see
building. Yeah.
yeah, and there was something about that I don't know, like it set, I'd say, a fire in my soul and my heart, just something that
Hmm.
I knew I was going to pursue and something that I was going to pursue wholeheartedly, and I knew that
Hmm.
that wanted to do. Obviously, ironworking, there's so much more to it than structural.
Hmm.
But I probably say that was something about it that I could not get my mind off, and I didn't really know how to pursue ironworking, and so I started doing my research and thinking, okay, well, what are the different aspects of the trade? And welding was one of those things that came up. So I told myself, you know what, if I can learn to weld or even the basics of it, I feel like that will get me closer to what I wanted to do. Um, and I don't know how to explain it. There's like I
Hmm.
looked into carpentry, I looked into uh mill work, I looked into, millwrights, I looked
Boilermakers, everything else, right?
boilermaker,
Yeah.
metal work. Nothing really attracted me to the same way as structural, just ironworking in general.
Yeah, I get it. I get it because I am a big steel guy too. And when I wasn't working for the ironworkers, I was working for mining companies or steel foundries or always
Mhm.
big companies and for big steel and big projects, thick steel,
Yeah,
and I like that stuff. And I felt like there's more of an art form working with big steel. Everyone thinks it's easy. It's like, no, it's a whole different set of skills working with big steel. And the
I
danger aspect of it too, I found like exhilarating.
that as well, but there's also something about big steel that kind of gives you this feeling of like you're so tiny in comparison
Hmm.
to huge, thing that's being lifted above you, and it gives you the sense of like, look, whoa, like wow.
It's like
And
how like the people must have felt when they built the pyramid,
yeah,
right? It was like we're a part of something that will last
for
beyond us. Yeah.
yeah, and even when I was around like in shop and I'd see big steel come in, it was just everything stopped for me, and I was like, oh my god, it was being rigged up. Like whoa, like it's never left me. Even like to till this day, like when I see big steel arrive on a site, I'm just like, so good. This looks like it looks amazing.
I want that.
So yeah, I want that. I want to be part of it. So yeah, no, it's still to this day I still have that passion for the bigger steel versus anything else.
Okay, so the seed of steel crosses your eyes and boom, this fire starts in your heart and you're like, I want that. You Google a little bit of Google and then all of a sudden you find yourself at Humber College, great program, great instructors there.
Mhm.
And you walk in for school on day one. So
Yeah.
can you compare to me what it was like walking in for day one at Humber for welding compared to day one at UFT for your undergrad? What's the difference?
I'd probably say that I was a lot more excited with Humber. I remember walking in and thinking, "Oh God, this is like the beginning of my career." Like that's what it felt like. I think I was a lot more nervous though because I felt like there was more
Hmm.
riding on with regards to Humber. Um, I had never picked up like I had no clue about it. The only thing I'd known about welding was just a little bit I'd seen on YouTube, so I had no idea what to expect. It was definitely more nerve wracking. Walking in with university, I wouldn't say I was excited. I kind of just walked in and I was like, everybody says it's going to be exhausting and it's going to be this and that. So I wasn't very excited, or I didn't really have that motivation to
It's
to really
hard to grasp that motivation in university because the winning the finish line is so far away,
Yeah.
right? You're like 4 years away, and then I get to start. Like,
I
you know what I
start
mean?
all over again.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Also going into university, I was so young. I was fresh out of high school. So I mean, I don't know very many people who can come out of high school and say, I know exactly what I want to do with my
Mm-hmm.
life.
Mm-hmm.
So it was pretty blurry for me at the time. I don't think I really was ready or to comprehend everything that I was putting on at the time with university. So it was different. When I went to Humber, I was 24, 25. I think I was a little bit older. So
Mm-hmm.
I definitely had made that choice. And I think for me at that point, it was the first time that I had made the decision to enroll in a post-secondary education that I wanted. It was something that I wanted to do. So there was a lot more
Yeah.
excitement
And you
with
could see
regards to that.
you're already envisioning your future, and this is what
Yeah,
I'm going to
I had
do,
a
and
whole
this is
I
what
had a whole
yeah.
I was like, this is what I'm gonna do, this is what's happening next, and this and this. So I was definitely more excited, yeah.
Now I know Humber has a bunch of different programs. Which is a program you enrolled in? Which, like, what was the length? What was it called?
It was called Welding Techniques. It was 2 semesters, I believe. Or yeah, 2 semesters, so about 4 months.
Mm-hmm.
And because COVID was around that time, I know that we did 2 months and then it got staggered for a couple of months and then we went back. I think it was 4 or 5 months after. So
Mm-hmm. So, in 4 months, and this is something I always talk to, young high school students, is like, in 4 months you're out there already. Like, you're already out there clanging the work lines and trying to swing hammers and make some money, which,
mhm.
compared to 4 years of university that you stuck out, and to just be like big question mark over your head, ding, like, how did
Yeah.
that feel, just getting through those 4 months of school? It must have felt like it must have flown by.
It did. It went by so fast. I still came out not knowing, like looking back now, I think I came out not knowing a lot because I didn't come in very much, but it went by so fast. And especially because it's all practical work. So, you either show up and you're in the welding booth learning, versus
Hmm.
university, it's all theoretical. And so they don't
Yeah,
really give you the skill set to go out and practice. It's all more like this is a theory and learn this theory. But, with Humber, it's like here's rods, here's your booth,
get
get and
at
learn.
it.
And so
Yeah.
but you come out, you're expected to kind of have at least a basic skill set of, whether to be running a bead or understanding welding in general. And obviously with time that gets better. But
Yeah, you're not in psychology class and they bring in someone from the hospital being like, all right, let's see if we can fix
you
this
figure it
person.
out. Here you go.
All right. Now I gotta ask a question. Like, and for the people that don't know, I already asked this right before the show started, because on your Instagram it says Latina. I'm Latino.
Yeah.
I talk about it all the time. I've actually done some shows in Spanish, which is why I've asked you if you speak Spanish, and I don't. You
Oh
said you
God, I
weren't
don't know if
quite there.
the whole conversation in Spanish, but
But I have Spanish parents,
okay.
so I went to university, and my dad was a welder.
Okay.
Like, the last thing he wanted was for me to be a welder. And
That's
I'm a
funny.
dude. And I can only imagine that for a Latina woman, and correct me if I'm wrong, you might have super progressive parents, but how did that go over? How did it be like, mom, dad, mommy, papi, I want to go to Humber to learn welding?
I actually didn't tell them I was going to Humber for welding. So I was like, I enrolled and then I think they slowly started to kind of see pictures and they were like, oh my God, it's fire and you're gonna get burnt. And I remember my mother, she did like this whole thing and she went on the internet and started searching welding. And she was like, you're gonna get cancer and all the fumes and burns. And I was like, mother, relax, fine. But like for her, like it was this panic. She just was like, she thought it was like the worst thing that could happen. She's like, you went to university, you should be doing more with that. So it was a bit difficult because it was hard to kind of explain to her, like, I do really love what I'm doing and I love what I'm pursuing. And I know it may seem dangerous to you, but it's like the risks and the harms of it just don't really factor in that much for me with regards to how happy I am when I'm welding or what I do. Um, I had family members in Peru who also they were more so excited. They were actually the men in the family. They were more excited about it. They were like, "Oh, this is so great. We're so happy for you." But it was more so my mother that was a little bit more cautious about it and a little bit,
Hesitant.
yeah, to accept that.
And what about now? Now that you're out there and you're working, once you get in with the union, which you said took a few years, but
It did.
once you get in with the union, you're kind of set for life if you want it. Like,
If
this
you
could
work
be,
hard, yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
And what
Yeah.
what does your mom and dad think about this now?
I don't think she's still come to terms with it. Sometimes she sees me working at heights or something like that, or even with welding. I think she still has that worry, and she still worries like I'm
Hmm.
gonna get injured, which is a normal fear because in the trades, I mean, injuries do happen. It's common. She worries about that more so than anything. But I don't know if she's accepted it, but I feel like she kind of just has more come to terms with like this is your life and you get to choose what to do with it. Um, but I'd say she still has that little bit of hesitation and worry about it.
Well, and the paychecks help parents too, being like, "Look, mom, I make good money." Like,
I make good
mom,
money. Yeah,
like,
I get a pension and
yeah.
benefits.
Mhm.
Yeah, that definitely factors in.
So let's talk a little bit about how you got into the ironworkers, because the unions are something I preach about. I worked with the unions, although I chose in my career to generally work non-union. That was just a personal choice. But
Yeah,
I have worked both sides. And I always tell people to 100% try it out, see if you like it, because they have a great training system, they have great supports, everything's good about it.
yeah.
But one of the tricky parts for people is getting in. Everyone
Ye-
thinks that you can just like go and just like walk in and get a job at the union. No, 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 no. It's a little bit more
It's
complicated than that.
way harder. Yeah.
So, what was your path and how did you get into your local?
So it took me a couple of years to get into the hall. I remember I inquired, and they gave me this response like, yeah, send your resume, this and that. And I was like, okay, here. I don't know why I didn't anticipate that it was going to be a lot harder than it was.
Hmm.
I started looking to ironworking like more in depth when I was at Humber, and I did send a resume, and I didn't really hear back from them, and I didn't really know what that was about. I thought, okay, well maybe I'm just not qualified enough or anything, and I when I graduated Humber, I decided to test for my flat for stick, and I thought, what,
Hmm.
that'll give me. I thought, they do stick, so I'm like, hey, let me get my flat. Hopefully that'll
Hmm.
encourage me in. So I submitted another resume, and then I kept calling them, and I kept, every like so weeks, and I kept saying, hey, when's your intake, this and that, and it was again same vague answer, like, oh, we're not taking intakes right now, COVID, and that, which again also slowed things down. Um, Chris, the weld shop instructor, gave me a call one day when I was in a fabrication
And
shop.
Chris rocks. I know Chris is going to definitely, he already messaged me on Instagram.
No,
He,
he knows. He knows. I told him I
yeah,
was
he
going.
knows.
Yeah. So he gave me a call one day, and he was just like, I don't think he knew who I was, but he gave me a call and he asked me, hey, I saw that you said you went to Humber for welding. Do you have your tickets? And I said, I just have my flat. And and he was like, oh, okay. Well, right now we're looking for intake for welders. And I said, oh, okay, And that was it. And I gave him a call back, and I said, you know what? I'm like, if I'm able to use your training facility, like I'd be more than happy to um, get my other positions, something that I really want to do.
Hmm.
And I think for him, I think he saw that I was just really enthusiastic and really motivated about wanting to learn to weld. So he kind of he was like, you know what, I like you, and he's like, I'm just gonna keep you here in my like in the back of my mind and just make sure. And it was him who I started to annoy. I think it was every 3-4 weeks I'd call him, and I was like, so when am I gonna start? And I kept calling him and like incessantly sending emails. And I was like, I want to get in. I want to get in. And he was always really kind and took the time to listen to me and tell me, you know what, I like your enthusiasm. It's just COVID or this and that. And I kept telling him, like, what can I do on my free
Hmm.
time now that I'm not in? And, he'd say things like, get your WMIS or your 4-step or whatever it was. And I went and did them. And, he asked me, are you ready to test for any other positions? And I remember saying, no, I'm not comfortable because I just haven't had the time to practice anything else. And yeah, for probably 6-7 months after that, I kept calling. I kept calling him, and I kept saying, hey, what's going on? He said, I've sent your resume. I've talked to the apprentice coordinator, and we're gonna shortlist you. And it kept getting closer, and I knew I was getting close, but it was again, I kept calling and calling and I think I called 3-4 times one day at one point, and the secretaries were like, "Who is this woman?" And I was like, "I'm Chris." Um, Again, really nice guy. Always took the time to talk to me on the phone. And yeah, I think one day I was working in the fab shop just welding chassis for that job, and I got a call and I picked up the phone, and it was one of the guys from the hall, and he said, "Hey, is this Jennifer?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Oh, are you still interested in becoming an iron worker?" And I was like, "Yes, I am." And I was
Mhm.
so excited. I remember I was just like, "Oh my God, my time has finally come." It's been a year of me, calling and begging to get in. And yeah, I was so happy when I got that call. And so I think it was a few weeks, not a few weeks, sorry, a few days later, I went in, and it was sort of like an orientation,
Mhm.
and I was just ecstatic because I thought, oh my God, like all the phone calls, all the nagging, I'm finally here. So yeah, that
Good,
was
good.
that was my journey to get in. And yeah, I remember when I came in, they told us about how it's very family based. And so like if they have, a lot of iron workers, I don't know if this is other trades and how that works, but uh, family. I mean, if you have like a daughter or a son who wants to be ironworking, I mean, that's who they're going to bring in first. And so for the rest of us, it's, they obviously have, I'm assuming they have a lot of applicants who apply to get in.
Hmm.
So they're very nitpicky about who they bring in. So
Yeah, and what they bring to the table too, like
yeah.
you walk up with all position stick, all position flux core, all position stainless. Well, they'll be able to send you out right away. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I didn't exactly have that easy because I didn't know anybody in here. I didn't have family. I only had my flat, so I wasn't really bringing much in, obviously. So they didn't really know who I was. So it was a lot harder to get in for me. I'd probably say
Hmm.
what, but yeah, I was super ecstatic when I got that call.
So the welding that you do outside of a union. So you went to Humber, and Ontario's different than where I live in Saskatchewan. We are very apprenticeship based.
Mhm.
Ontario, not so much. There's not that much of apprenticeship, right? Outside of the unions.
Right.
So when we do what you called like the welding techniques, a 2 semester program, we call it an applied certificate program. Same thing, 20, it's 2 semesters.
Right.
Um, we get a level one, like you're a registered level one apprentice.
Okay.
Now at Humber, I don't think you come out as a apprentice of anything. You just learn your welding techniques and you're
Right.
off,
Yeah.
right?
They give you the
Now,
opportunity to like test for positions if you'd like to, and you
mm,
get like a diploma, I guess, but nothing really formal. Like, oh, here's an apprenticeship or
yeah.
no, yeah.
So then when you got in with the iron workers, were you able to keep your welding hours from before to use them towards your apprenticeship? Because now you're going to be working towards an iron worker red seal, which is a little bit different than a welding red
So I don't even have my welding red seal. When I came out, I only came out with like
seal.
a big ticket. I didn't.
Yeah.
They weren't even hours. I mean, we had shop hours, but when I came in like
Zero. Yeah.
probationary, nothing. Yeah, very from the beginning. So
Hmm. So have you decided yet which path within the iron workers you want to take? Because there's a whole bunch.
I know I want to stick with miscellaneous or structural. I did miscellaneous for the first year. It was I was so new that I feel like there was
Hmm.
just so much coming at me that I didn't really understand. I did do a little structural job. It was more so the end of it for the past month, which I really really enjoyed because that was probably my first experience with bigger steel and just
Hmm.
break and everything. So I was a lot more excited with that. I would like to continue with structural. We'll see how that goes, or if the company takes that direction, or where I get sent off to. But I do like structural. I would like to. I do have my all position tickets now, so I would like to continue and maybe weld something really like a lot bigger scale. But we'll see. We'll see
You'll
how
have
that
to
goes.
get the haul to send you out to Saskatchewan, and then you can go underground into the mines and see what that's like.
Yeah, once I become a journey person, yeah, boom me out. I'm all for it.
So let's talk a little bit about what the day to day looks like for you now as a young iron worker. You're a year in, so you're still an apprentice. You still have a long road ahead of you of learning. But I know that in these situations, generally, unless there's a bad egg, but most of the iron workers I've worked with have been very supportive, very friendly. What's it like for you on site? How do people treat you as an apprentice and as a person of color and a woman?
So when I my first, I'd say 6 months of my apprenticeship were, I'd probably say the worst and the most difficult for me. I came into this new environment. I didn't know anybody. I was so anxious with everybody that I was meeting. I don't really think I understood anything much, if any, if at all. So I was probably more so stressed out. Um, I ran into some great people. I ran into some so people.
Hmm.
Um, it was a journey. I mean, I'd say that after those 6 months, everybody that I worked with and I went to school and everything, even the people I work with at my current company, they're all so great. I have nothing negative to say about anybody. Um, but it's been different. I mean, on a construction
Hmm.
site, I haven't had anybody treat me any differently. I mean, sure, you get stared at a little bit more. They see a girl, they're like, "Oh, who's that?" But I
Hmm.
haven't been treated badly by anybody on sites. Most of the trades they're great. Everyone I meet is really supportive, super encouraging. They treat me just like anybody else. Um, yeah, I
So,
probably
what
say the
were
six.
some of the challenges that make you think about it? In that first 6 months, where were the things that made you feel like maybe you were a little bit out of your depth?
So for the first 6 months, it was just maybe people who, I guess they didn't believe in me, or just the way they treated me. They treated me a little bit differently.
Hmm.
Things that were said behind my back, or I worked with one person who, um, my first day on site, I introduced myself to them, and they looked at me up and down, and you could tell that they just kind of didn't like
Wrote
who.
you off. Yeah.
Yeah, they were kind of just like, okay, whatever. And me being new 2 months in, I thought, okay, that was an awkward interaction.
Hmm.
And that same day, I was told to get on my hands and knees and grind. And I didn't really make much of it. I thought, okay, whatever, until I actually did it. And then I turned around and I see him standing there with 3, 4 other foremen laughing at me. And I remember thinking, like, oh, you're trying to humiliate me. Like, this is what this is about.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
little things like that really do get to you, because you're kind of in this really, in this male environment, and you kind of think, well, I don't know who to turn to. I don't really know what to do in this situation.
Or what to
Um,
trust. Yeah.
and who to trust. Exactly. Yeah. And because I was so new, I didn't really know who to trust. I didn't know who to turn to. Given, granted, if this were to happen to me now, I know I could just say, you know what, I know other people in this trade, other people that I'm friends with. I could call them and say, I've had a bad day. What can I do? I know other foremen, I know other journeymen that would be more than happy to say, yeah, I'll take you, I'll bring you to my site or whatever.
Yeah. You
But
don't need to put up with that. Yeah.
but when you're so new, and not having family in the trades, you're kind of in this situation of, I don't know who to turn to. I don't know what to do. I don't know what the right situation is. Um, People sometimes, I'd say for the first 6 months, I was also very, I'm gonna say slow. I couldn't think ahead. I didn't. I was so caught up in my head, in my own anxiety. I didn't really know how to behave. I didn't know how
Hmm.
to adapt to the environment. And people sometimes, I feel like, they forget what it's like to start off as an apprentice when you don't know the name of every tool. You don't know. You can't always think ahead. Sometimes you're just scared of everybody and everything. And
Hmm.
so people can be a little bit harsh, I guess. Again, not everybody, but I did run
Yeah.
into individuals who were a little harsh, and I didn't enjoy that. But eventually I did meet two guys. They showed up at my site, and they just changed everything for me. They were super supportive, and I felt, I think for the first time in those 6 months, I felt, there's somebody here who believes in me, and,
Hmm.
and has my back, and I know what will stand up for me. So they made the world of a difference when I met them, and ever since then, everybody I've met has been just so great. So I love what I do, but I'd probably say those 6 months were a roller coaster for sure.
That it brings up a very good point, because you never know someone's history or their background, right? So,
Mhm.
for example, in my family, my dad was a welder. So I grew up knowing all the welding terms and lingo. I'd see my dad's shop, I'd go to meetings with him. But I also have a little sister, and she saw that all too. So my sister is a girl, a little Latina girl. She's like 5 feet tall. And people will be like, "Oh, what do you know?" And she knows everything, right?
Right.
She
Yeah.
can pick up a welder and she can weld because she's been around it her whole life. But
Right.
sometimes you forget that you may go to be an iron worker, or someone might go to school to be a welder. I saw this as a teacher myself when I started teaching. Is that some students come in, they've never even seen a wrench, like they
Yeah.
have no idea what anything is, and the person sitting next to them knows what everything is, but it's their both first day of school. So you want to treat them equally, but one's going to just jump out ahead and be like, I'm not scared, I'm comfortable, I'm going to, and the other one's going to be like, I don't know how this works, this is scary, someone show me. And immediately, like you said, it's not like you're being slow on purpose, it just takes a while to get traction.
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember my very first day. I walked in, and one of the journeymen was like, "Hey, can you go get me a come along?" And I looked at him like, my eyes were just glazed over, and I was like, I was like, I don't know what that is. He's like, yeah, it's this orange thing that's in the toolbox. So I was like, oh, okay. And I walked over, and I stood there looking at the toolbox, and I was like, what orange thing? Like, everything in here is orange. And I looked at somebody else who was, I don't even think he's an iron worker. And I looked at him, and I'm like, what's a come along? And he's like, that thing right there. And I was like, oh, thank you. And I was just in my head, and I'm like, oh God, what is happening? So, obviously it's funny now, but at the time it can be so scary. It's just, it's hard, yeah, for sure. But
Hmm.
again, I don't want it to sound like, iron workers are terrible people. The overwhelmingly amount of supportive people who believed
Hmm.
it, and took the time to listen to me and help me and were patient. It's just, it's great. And
Yeah.
I yeah, it's just those little individuals that can
Well,
sometimes.
and this is the lesson, and that's why I was asking you and wanted to get more specific, because it's a lesson for anyone listening that's thinking about getting into welding or into any trade or anything new, even
Right.
anything new, right? Like, the first little bit's going to be tough,
It's gonna
right?
suck.
It's just going to, that's just the way it is. Like the first time you use a frying pan to cook your eggs when you're 8 years old, you burn yourself and you're like, this is stupid, right? Like,
Yeah.
and it's just, that's the way learning works, right? And when you're going into a trade like welding, ironworking, there's not just put eggs in a pan and cook. Everything is complicated.
Hmm.
There's steps upon steps upon steps just to do the simplest thing. And that's before you even put in safety. Safety is a whole nother layer of steps on top of steps. And then you have some people that hate it and some people that love it and their own personalities. And so it can be extremely overwhelming. I remember being young and walking onto sites. I tried flipping from ironworking to pipe fitting, and let me tell you, that wasn't the smoothest of transitions. They
No, it
didn't
is.
look very they didn't look very kindly on me, first of all, for jumping ship and for blah blah blah. But I was at a point in my career where I try something different, but
Yeah.
I didn't stay because I wasn't happy there. I was like, no, I can't. And actually, that's when I left
Yeah.
all unions and I went back to private industry. But it
Mhm.
was for the people that are listening, like what what Jennifer's telling you, it's important to understand. Like, be prepared. Like sleep well. Try not to get too anxious. If you're on meds, make sure you don't miss them. Do all the things you need to do to be healthy, because it's going to be a hard, stressful few months until you get your feet under you. And what happens is that eventually you connect with a mentor. This is something that just happens, and it happened
Yes.
to you. Eventually, you'll connect with a mentor, and it's a very beautiful thing when it happens. All of a
It,
sudden, someone in your job will just like pink. It's like Lego
yeah.
coming together, and then you're like, "Bro, I got you, bro, I got you,"
It
and then that's
makes
it.
the biggest difference because they believe in you on days that you don't believe in yourself.
Hmm.
They give you the opportunity, they're patient. And it's nice to have at least one person, even if like, everybody else doesn't like you or they don't believe in you. It's nice to have that one person that says, you know what, like I got you. And
Hmm.
shout out to them. His name is Christian and the other one is Steve. And they both just made like the world of a difference at that for those first when I first met them. I was like, oh my God, they're so great. I'm so happy to have them. And even at my current job, right? Like I've met somebody else as well who has my back. So yeah, no, it's
And you'll
you
never
you
forget Christian and Steve for the rest of your life. My two
I,
mentors were Larry and Terry. I will never forget them. They were and one of them actually passed away last year. I was broken, man. I was like,
it
oh,
you physically love them at one point and you're just
yeah.
like, I love you. Like I still keep in contact with them and I tell them all the time, like honestly, I think you saved me from not just myself, but you saved me from like so much. Like
Mhm.
it made a difference. Yeah. So I'm really
All right. Well,
thankful.
let's take a quick break on commercial here. We'll be back with Jennifer here talking about ironworking in her career, and we'll talk a little bit about what's happening now in her career, what she's working on, and where she's going. So make sure you guys stay tuned here on the CWB Association podcast. And welcome back to the CWB Association podcast. My name is Max Ceron. Thanks for sticking with us through this fantastic interview, learning lots about not just what ironworking is, which we can Google, but more about a story, the journey within the ironworkers for a Latina ironworker apprentice, right off her website. I didn't make that up. So this is off of her Instagram, Jennifer Muma. So oh yeah, the I's for Isabel, middle name, right, right.
Yes.
I was like, what's the I Muma? Got it, right. Also, my mom's name for the people listening. So, all right, Jennifer. So, when we finished before the break, we were talking about finding that mentor, kind of
Mhm.
getting your jam going. You're like, okay, now I'm starting to feel better. You now know what the tools are. You know who to talk to. You've met a few GFs a couple times. You've
Yeah.
talked to the safety guy. You understand how to tape areas off and how to do hot sheets and all these things that you got to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hot work permits and all this, the millions of things that apprentices are sent to do because the journey persons don't like doing it. So like you
Yeah.
make the, you have to do
It's our
monitors.
responsibility. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's your responsibility to set up the sites usually and get things ready, string out cables, all this stuff. Okay, so you're kind of rocking and rolling. Now, what is your day to day like? What have you been working on for this last week? What is like wake up in the morning? What time's your shift start? Walk me through your day.
So typically, my shift starts at 7 till about 3. I recently we've started doing 6 a.m. till about 2, which I like better because you start
Yeah,
earlier, get out there.
me too.
Now that it's getting a little bit darker, we can't always start at 6, especially if you're doing like outside work. But for I'd probably say the last month we were doing 6 a.m. to 2, which is great. And typical day would be, well, I was on a structural site, so typical day would be, just getting the lifts ready, getting all whatever you need. We have these little portable welding machines that we have in the lift, so it would be getting
Mhm.
your rod, doing whatnot. Usually, the foreman did all the paperwork, so that was new to me
Done.
because
Good.
and I was doing paperwork like jar cards, again, like you're saying,
Mhm.
hot permit. So it was just getting the lifts ready. After that, you go with your partner, you talk about what you're gonna do. Usually you grab the prints and you kind of try to make sense of what you're looking at. It doesn't
Mhm.
always you. And you go up there and we were welding things like wind columns. We were installing these roof frames. So it was maybe someone was rigging and we'd be up there waiting to connect it. Um, Wind columns, things like tacking it into place, just making sure that it's on both sides of a column and it kind of like V's out, I guess.
Mhm.
It adds more support. And make sure that the column is plumb as well, so that it's I don't even know how to explain it properly, but
It's got to be level. It's got to be straight. Everything's got to fit. And if it
yeah,
doesn't fit, then you guys got to figure out how to make it
refabricated.
fit.
And which a lot of the time, a lot of the pieces that come to site, they're never properly fabricated. So then you have to refabricate it and figure it out, which isn't necessarily bad. I mean, you learn a lot when you have to refabricate something and to install it. So,
Mhm.
welding it, tacking it into place. Um, and it's very
Mainly,
fast.
mainly 7018, 1/8 all day.
So yeah, we use 7018. We've also used like 1/8, 532, I believe we used as well. They
Yeah,
prefer
nice
like
heavy
bigger
rod.
rods
Yeah.
because it's faster and it lays
Mhm.
down, so like lays down more weld. Sorry. So yeah, those are the kind of rods we've used, but it's very fast paced. I mean, it's kind of like go go go, one thing to the next. Um,
And how physically
yeah,
demanding would you say it is? On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being Olympic athlete marathon, 0 being not getting out of bed. What's the level of effort between 1 to 10?
so structural is, I'd probably say, a little bit more physically demanding than anything else. It can be pretty pretty heavy. 0 to 10 being demanding. I don't know. I don't want to say at like a 10, maybe like a 7 or a 6. It really depends what you're doing with the day. I mean, if you're rigging, I mean, obviously you're going to be on the ground. It's not as physically
Mhm.
demanding as someone who's lifting a big piece of steel or moving it around. Miscellaneous work is a lot less because
Mhm.
you have lifts or it's like railings or things like that. Um,
Brackets and stuff like
Brackets,
that. Yeah. Yeah.
little nitpicky things. So it's not as bad. But structural, it's also a lot more fast paced. So it's kind of like
Mhm.
go go go. You don't really stop. So in that case, that was something I had to adjust to. Um, but it can be pretty physically demanding. You have to fuel your body properly. I mean, I know my first day.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, my first day on that structural site, I don't even think I ate that much. I didn't eat properly, and I was just dying. It was so bad. And from there I learned, like, I need to hydrate, I need to eat properly
Mhm.
because I have a lot to exert throughout the day and I can't just stop. I can't just say I'm tired. So it
Yeah, I'd
can be
always
pretty
carry like
physically.
an energy bar in my back pocket just in case. And by the end of the
Yeah,
week, you'd be like, "Oh yeah, I got that energy bar." It's all just like mangled, squished,
melted and just
melted. You're like, "Oh yeah, well, it's still good." Like,
yeah. And even that, like sometimes we would for whatever reason, foreman would decide, okay, let's just skip lunch and let's work through lunch and leave a little
mhm.
bit earlier, which is fine. But then you're stuck up on the steel and you think, oh well, I kind of need something to munch on. So it's nice to carry something in your pocket, like you said, like a granola bar or protein
Mhm.
bar, or just have that on you, to munch
Yeah,
on.
I learned that lesson because so like you're saying, like working structural. So I only ever did structural because I was a welder. I was a welder. I wasn't anything else. So basically,
Okay.
I just had to be there to weld and weld all day. That's what my gig was. So a lot of my time was hauling cables and rod ovens and stuff and getting prepped and ready, moving steel into place and then tacking and welding it once it was ready.
Hmm.
Now, that was in my 20s and I found it to be like a 6 or a 7 in terms of effort. I went back and picked up some permits for work with the ironworkers when I was 39. And let me tell you, at 39, carrying cables up 17 floors
Oh my god, don't give me
is it was terrible. Like I thought I was dying. And and people always laugh like, oh, why do welders carry such big lunch boxes? You go to other jobs and it's always these cute little lunch boxes. You go to welders and it's these giant thermos lunch boxes And it's like,
Yeah.
you need that much calories just to get through a day. Like, you
Yeah.
need to eat that much or else you're done because
Yeah.
you're sweating all day. And that sweat, you're losing your salts, you're losing your potassiums, you're losing
Yeah.
everything, and you're dying. Like, you gotta
Yeah.
stay hydrated. You gotta, do they bring Squincher on your job site? I don't know that here in Saskatchewan they have Squincher. It's like medical grade Gatorade. It's the bomb. And like,
No, but I
yeah,
carry electrolytes with me because I
yeah,
actually
yeah.
like when I first started, I was so
Mhm.
dehydrated. I kept drinking water in the summer and it was going right through me. And I was like, what's happening? So at one point I started carrying electrolytes because I'm like, this is just not going to work for me. And in
Mhm.
the summer, I mean, you're already like in the heat and you're
That's right.
sweating profusely.
Coveralls and stripes
And
on and
oh my God. And if you're welding, I mean, I don't know,
mhm.
but some
And
people might
hard
weld
hat.
short sleeves and yeah. And especially at least if you're welding, depending what you do. I mean, some people like to weld with short sleeves. I'm always wearing a long sleeve. So,
Mhm.
oh God, it's yeah. No, you need to be prepared for sure. You need to
Yeah,
fuel your
tell Chris to look up Squincher or somebody Squincher. All the iron workers out here in Saskatchewan use them for underground because you sweat. It's even hotter underground, right? So
yeah.
then you like just sweat like crazy and you'll pass out. Like, you'll just like, it's so quick. It'll be like, oh, I kind of feel a little bit dizzy. Boom, you wake up 4 hours later. You're like, what happened? So, like, yeah, you have to make sure you hydrate. For all the young welders, hydrate.
Yeah. That's funny. I'm gonna look into that. I don't even know if we carry that, but that's probably something we should.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they even sell like little individual packs where you can just crack it and throw it in a water bottle, and it's like instant relief. And then
Wish
they're
I
yummy. They taste like McDonald's Kool-Aid, but like 10 times stronger.
that
Like,
sounds really addicting too.
it's good for hangovers, but you did not hear that from me. Nobody heard that from me.
And next thing you know, people are just buying them to have at home
Yeah, yeah.
all the
So,
time.
you're working 8-hour days, 9-hour days. Any overtime? Have you guys been
Yeah.
picking up overtime?
Yeah, we do have quite a bit of overtime. I mean, it's not every day. Sometimes it's,
Hmm.
Monday, Friday, you do 2 hours extra. Sometimes you do four, the occasional weekend. With miscellaneous, there were like a couple weeks where you had a lot of overtime and then some weeks where you didn't. With structural, overtime is great because you lose, we're affected by the weather, right? So, like, for example, if it's raining or like a little bit of rain, we'll work through it. But if it's raining really heavy, I mean, you can't weld or, you don't
Hmm.
work walking the steel. So you do lose days because of that.
Days, yeah.
So in that case, overtime does come in handy, and sometimes things need to get done. So we do have a lot of overtime, which is great. Yeah,
And let's talk about, for the people that don't know anything about the ironworks, let's talk about the pension and the benefits. Like, we're talking top tier world. I mean, the pipe fitter guys and the boilermaker guys are gonna fight about this, but I mean, all of them top tier. Like, do you know what the numbers are? Like, how many dollars per hour go into your pension?
I
It's like
should know
six
this.
or $7 an hour or something like that.
I should know this, and I don't. But I know that with like it's terrible. I get my monthly like I get my quarterly statement. I just got it
Yeah,
for my
yeah.
first, and I looked at it, and I'm like, oh, it's not bad. Considering my first year. But I don't should know this, and I really don't. This is
No,
terrible.
but for the people that are listening, it's a lot. It's more than you'll
It is.
find at anything else. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know when we get double time, like it's like double the pension hours that go in there, which is
Hmm.
great as well. Benefit wise, I have used my benefits. I mean, it's like really good. I mean, I think it's like 95% for prescriptions, um, dentals. It's again like 90%. I think it's roughly around there. It's really good, and you get like a lot. Like you get psychotherapy, you get
Massage, chiropractor, everything. Yeah.
physio, yeah, you get everything. And our benefits are really, really good. So, and they definitely come in handy. Like physio, massage therapy is one of those
Hmm.
I've definitely been using a lot. So, yeah, no, I've never had benefits like that. So when that came in, I was like, all right, well, let me go do that and that, and just about everything else I could get.
Well, I'm gonna be
Um,
going in, I think, in a week or two to get a couple new teeth. So, and I actually just did a tour of some colleges, and I was telling these young kids that are just coming into welding, it's like, I had two kids by 24, so I was young. I had kids young, but I
mhm.
was a welder at 17, and I've never had to pay for any prescriptions for my kids their entire lives. I've never
Wow.
had to worry about the doctor. I've never had to worry about if they knocked a tooth out. I've never had to worry about glasses. It's just all covered. And that's such a privilege that the trades has given me that I don't know if people really understand the value of that because I've worked other jobs, not trades, and the benefits are not even close.
Yeah, they're terrible. They're terrible. And when you have good benefits, you don't realize like just again, like you said, it's a privilege and just how much you use and like just how great it is to be able to say, you know what, like I want a massage therapy because whatever's hurting and I can get it and I don't actually
Hmm.
have to out of pocket. Like these things add up if you were to pay out of your own pocket, but knowing that like your insurance covers it, you're like, yeah, that's a lot and that's good. And it's nice to know that, if you do have whether you're struggling with mental health problems or you have
Hmm.
physical pain, you do have the support, and you have the financial means to afford it and have that. So I definitely don't take that for granted. Yeah, it's great.
Now for the women that have been watching this, and you know, I don't know if I've had a female iron worker. I might have before. We've interviewed like 100 people, so sometimes I forget. But you know, for a Latina woman being in the trades, and you said, you know, it's a level effort of 6 or 7, not too bad. Any other obstacles that you would say, like, do you ever feel unsafe because you're smaller, or things ever too, you know, like, is there anything like that that might be something you could give as a piece of advice to someone thinking about it?
Well, it's funny because I'm not really small. I'm like 5'9", so I'm
Yeah,
pretty
you're
tall.
like 3 inches taller than me, so
Yeah, yeah, no, I'm pretty tall. I definitely don't like. I'm definitely not like a small girl on site that you will see
yeah,
like
yeah.
girls on site and they're short, and I'm like, you're
Hmm.
adorable. But no, I danger wise, honestly, I'd probably say, I mean, if you're working with bigger steel or just about in anything, I mean, if you're working on a construction site, um, one of the things people always told me when I first started was like, you need to be very aware. Like, you need to have situational
Hmm.
when you're on site because of pinch points, and you know, especially when you're so new, you tend to stand in like the worst spots, like right in the spot where like something could like push you to a wall, or like you could.
Yeah.
And you know, it's funny because I remember journey people would always grab me and they'd be like, "Get out of there! Like, why are you standing there?" And I'm like, "I don't know." Like, it seemed like a good spot.
Don't you see this giant thing swinging towards you? It's like,
Yeah, and
oh.
you don't even think about that. But that's definitely one of the big, like, I'd probably say when you first start is just be aware of your surroundings. I mean, construction
Yeah.
sites, depending on what
Head
site
on a
you're on,
swivel. That's what they say. Head on a swivel. Always be looking around. Yeah.
there's always something going on, whether it's forklifts or it's, you know, like heavy equipment machinery, whether you're rigging something, you need to always be on the defense and always looking around you because it can get pretty scary. The other day, actually, I was on that structural site and I was up there and I was doing a little bit of connecting with somebody, and I was scared shitless because there's this like giant piece, you know, coming at me. Someone had rigged in the cranes, you know, bringing it forward, and I'm standing there and this piece is coming at me, and they're like, "Oh, Jennifer, grab it," and I'm like, "I have to grab it?" Like, I'm like, if that piece just takes me with it, like it scared me. And I don't know why, it terrified me, just that thing coming at me. They're like, "You know where you're fine," and I'm like, "Yeah, I don't know. That thing weighs like a couple tons, and I'm just this tiny human in comparison to that." I've had my scares in
Did
my
you
career.
grab it?
I did grab it because eventually you have to kind of
And
swing
then
it
you're
into place,
fine. Yeah.
put in your spud, yeah. But when it was swinging at me, I remember just like screaming out loud, "I'm going to die!" And they were just all laughing because they thought it was they thought it was all so funny. But I'm like, I'm gonna die. This thing's coming at me a mile an hour, and because you don't really know also who's on the crane
Hmm.
and you know what's going on. So
And those crane operators, oof, let's not talk about them. No.
some of them are really great, but then you know there's those that just like you're like, why is this thing moving at me like a mile an hour? Like, slow down. I'm one person. So yeah, no, it's different being you know, on site. There's a lot of dangers and a lot of hazards. You just need to be aware, and if you're lucky enough
Hmm.
to be paired, you know, usually you're paired with a journey person, then they're always gonna they should have your back and they should be paying attention for you.
Well,
And
and nobody wants to get hurt. Job sites,
no,
I mean, having an injury in a job site slows the whole job down. So even the greediest of people don't want accidents, right?
no, yeah, and they'll always be like they'll always have your back and say, you know, don't stand there or don't do this. So they'll explain things to you. You know, even little things like when I started, for example, I had we had what's it called? Oh God, I can't remember it. We tied this rope onto the piece just to kind of be able to guide it into place, and I'd wrapped that rope onto my hand, and you know I
Oh
remember
no.
the foreman was just like, "Don't ever do that," and I was like, "Why?" And he was
They'll
like,
just rip your arm off. Yeah.
you know, it was just like a little railing, so it wasn't, you know, in
Hmm.
the grand scheme of things that big. But he was like, "Don't ever do that," because he's like, if you're ever doing that on like a big structural piece, he's like, your arm's getting ripped off. You know, and
Hmm.
at the time I was like, well, I didn't think of that. It's smart and it's pretty common sense, but you know, it's little things like that, you know, that you do when you just don't know when you start. So it's dangers are all around the place when
Do
you're
you know how to do all the ironworker knots?
so I went to school recently for 2 months. Oh my god.
Because it's a
I
big deal. Ironworker knots are a big deal.
so there's two main that we use. There's bowline and then there's like a clove hitch and a
Hmm.
half hitch. And I'm left-handed, so for me, like every time they were teaching knots, I was doing them like the complete opposite way. And they start off with like a bowline, and I was like, I can't grasp this like at all. Like, what is this? And everybody was just doing it, you know, going at it. And I
Yeah.
was like, what on earth? Like it was really
Yeah.
funny.
And
So
somebody's always got some weird saying, being like the rabbit over the hill, into the tree, and under the hill. I'm like, what?
I'm like, that makes no sense. Please stop. So no, I don't know all of them for sure. I'm pretty sure we had to learn, like, I think it was a good 10 or 12 for our
Mm-hmm.
final year of school, and I learned them, and I'm pretty sure I forgot like a good chunk of them, and I only know the two main ones. But other than that, I mean, I wouldn't say I know all of them. Oh God,
Well,
no.
you know the saying about tying knots, right?
What's that?
If you can't tie knots, tie lots.
Lots. Yeah, I do remember that saying. I do remember that. Although if you go to a site and you've been to school and you've had your training and you're tying lots, oh God, someone's gonna say something. They're gonna be like,
Oh,
tie
for
a
sure.
So I am
I've been
aware.
called out on that. I've been called out on site. When I'm doing a permit, they're like, "Oh, you're not a real iron worker." It's like, well, I was, but now I just do permits. Okay, well, let's show me how to do it. Like they'll ask you right away, like, show me how to do a reverse clove half hitch on this pipe and lift it up. I was like, okay, guys, calm down. Like,
I know how to do that. Yeah. No, you should know
so
you're not. Maybe not all of them, but you're not always going to use all of them. But it's good to know. Definitely good to refresh on them sometimes.
I use it with my boat all the time. I'm like, oh, there's a nice quick knot that's easy to let go because it's a good sign of a knot is that you can take it apart easily. It's not making the knot; it's a knot that can come undone, right? So,
Boy, yeah.
yeah.
Good point.
Now, in your future, you got, are you a level 1 or a level 2 apprentice?
I think I just level between level 1 and level 2. I'm not too
Okay,
sure. 75%. So I'm
so
still.
you still got a couple years ahead of you. You're gonna work towards that iron worker red seal. What's your long term plan? Like, what's the vision of what you see yourself either with the iron workers or outside the iron workers? Or, what do you see for your future?
So I do, after I become a journey person, I would like to boom out and go to another province and kind of see what work is out there. It'd be nice
Mm-hmm.
to it'd be a new environment, see kind of what that's going to be like. Um, I have thought about maybe having my own business and like
Mm-hmm.
dating and if that's like, oh my God, that's like way into the future. If I had like all the funds available and I knew what I was doing, because I'm so new
Mm-hmm.
that there's so much I don't know and I don't understand, so it's hard for me to like envision that. But yeah, I would like to have my own fabrication shop and then my own iron workers and everything if possible. But again, like there's so much to learn and so much to do. I did look into like courses on the side, like advanced blueprint reading,
Mm-hmm.
other welding courses. Like there's obviously flux core. There's so many other positions you could
Yeah, there's
other
there's endless tickets, right? There's endless tickets or qualifications, we should call them.
yeah.
Um,
I
I
did
and
look
on
into like
you
welding.
the yeah,
Yeah.
sorry.
No, sorry, no. I looked into like welding and inspector like tickets. That's another thing I
Hmm.
was really looking into. So again, I'm not like the best welder in the world or anything, but with time I feel like I would like to be able to
Iron
inspect.
workers can't. You can't say that. You can't say that. You can't say that because if someone's gonna be like, "Ugh, no iron workers can weld." Don't ever say that to a pipe fitter because then you got what would you say to a pipe fitter when they tell you that they're better welders than iron workers? You tell them, well, at least I can I don't just weld in circles all day.
That's true, yeah. That's a different skill set. Oh God.
Yeah, it is. It is. I
Yeah.
actually had a huge argument this weekend with some welders about that. I was like, pipe and then plate, and then what's easier? Well, pipe steel's better quality than plate steel. That's why it's easier. Well, that's harder, and this is harder, or you can just do it like this or like that. It's like, I love this. I love this. There's no winning, right? Like, I mean, everyone's just loves what they
Everybody
do,
wants
right?
yeah, everybody loves what they do, and I think everybody has their own challenges. I mean, welding pipe, welding
Hmm.
structural, they all come with their own. Every process has their own, something that you have to kind of overcome and challenge. So, yeah.
And then in terms of the other work you're looking to do, I love that idea, and I think that's something that everyone should do. Then you get to know what you don't like. People always say, "Oh yeah, finding your passion." I struggle with that thought. I feel like if you find what you hate,
Then
you're
you find
actually
out what
getting.
you like.
Then you find out what you like because if you just find what you like, let's say I find what I like tomorrow,
Right.
then I'll never know what else I might have liked. Right? Because
Right.
it could be more than one thing, right? It's
Yeah.
not like, oh, this is my passion. I'm gonna do this for the rest of my life. I would rather find out what I hate and then keep
Yeah.
the door open for all the other things, right?
Right. Yeah. For sure. No, that's I think for me, I from what I've done, and I can't say I've done a lot, but when I did miscellaneous work, not that there's anything wrong with it. I think that you learn a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, I just never lit that fire in me with like, little railings, little nitpicky things, even
Mm-hmm.
things big. I've never it's just one of those things that doesn't, again, like I said, it doesn't light that fire in me. I'm not I'm more excited and a lot more motivated with when I see bigger steel. So even like structural miscellaneous, I'm fine with as well. But
Mm-hmm.
little things not my thing. So I don't know if I were to start my own business or something or fabrication, I don't know if that would be where I would
You'd
aim
be
for.
looking for bigger, thicker
Yeah.
jobs.
Yeah.
Well, if you want to do big work, come out west anytime. You got BC with logging and all the pulp and paper mills, and then you got Saskatchewan with the mining. Big jobs. That's big iron worker land out here in the summer. You come out here for like a May, you got
Yeah.
6 weeks to work. It'll blow your mind. It's super fun potash mines.
Yeah.
And then Manitoba, you got paper and pulper and lumber. Every province has their own thing, right? It's super cool. I've always wanted to go to the Maritimes because they got like nickel and iron mines out there that I've never worked at a mine like that. I'd like to see what they're like.
Yeah, be different.
Yeah, it'd be super cool. All right.
Yeah.
Well, this is pretty much, we've come to the end of the interview. This has been super fun, really, really interesting conversation about, your path, how you found iron working, or it found you almost,
Mhm.
and pulled you in, and
Yeah.
and your dream now of wanting to get next level. Now, what about working with the iron workers themselves? Is there anything that you see yourself doing with them in terms of, like the outreach stuff that they do? Because iron workers don't just do iron worker stuff. They also do like talks at schools. They always ask
Mhm.
people, their members, to do volunteers for like career fairs. Are you going to get involved in stuff like that? Are you going to try to be more of an advocate? Being a person of color, being a female in the iron workers, I feel like you'd be perfect, and you're very outspoken.
Thank you. I would. I think for me, my biggest challenge is that I'm really introverted and I'm super awkward. So even before I did this podcast, I was like, this is going to be so awkward. Oh my God. I'm not the type of person to go out there and just be like a social butterfly. So I, if I can, and I feel like, obviously I would like to, eventually, I do also just kind of want to like meet more people and
Mm-hmm.
expand and kind of get my name out there before I do decide to, whether it be, run for office or give talks in school. I would kind of like to just to be known a little bit more and to make more connections. But I definitely do see that I would like to talk to not just girls but people in school, and I know there's a lot of shortage with people getting into the trades, and whether it be
Mm-hmm.
ironworking, it's good to encourage them and say, hey, like this worked out for me. Like I went to university, but this is still the path I chose, and I do love it. The
Mm-hmm.
iron workers, they do a lot. I mean, not to say that I want to take Chris's job, because I don't. I think he's great. But if there was a position opening in the shop, I would like to do that. I think that would be really great.
Well,
I had
next time Chris comes to one of the parties that we throw for CWB, I know he was at the last one. You'll
yeah.
have to get him to bring you, because we throw the best parties.
Yeah, I'll definitely go. But I had, I took me quite a bit to learn to weld, so I know I would love to be able to help others or teach people. Hopefully, in a couple of years I'll have more experience, but I would like to kind of share that and help. So I'd say welding is probably my main something that I really love doing.
Mhm.
So it would be great to teach someone in shop or theory or something. But we'll
Yeah.
see where things go.
Awesome. Are there any shout outs you want to send out to anybody before we end?
Yeah, so I think I mentioned them already. So there was Steve Raposo, there was Christian Pizarro, there's Ian Miller.
Christian Pizarro. That sounds like a Chilean name.
They
What
are,
is
yeah,
he?
Chilean, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I said, I think it was Ian Miller and then Jeb and Daw. The last two are the guys I work with at my current company. So yeah, probably the better people I've worked with. And of course Chris Rebello,
Mhm.
who's so great. Yeah.
All
they're
right.
great.
Well, awesome. Thank you very much for taking the time for this interview. This has been very informative, and hopefully it's very inspiring to young people to get into the trades. And we need people in the trades. And if anybody wants to try a little bit of the adventure life of ironworkers, which I love, I have many dear friends who are ironworkers. I totally give props to that trade and what the work they do. So always find their information. The locals all have their own websites from province to province. Reach out anytime. And of course, you can reach out to the CWB Association if you want to move or try a different area or need a contact, because we are connected with all of them across Canada. CWB is a part of every iron worker, in their career. So we're in there. So anybody reach out. And for the people following the podcast, thank you very much for being part of our family here at the podcast, and stay tuned. We got lots of cool stuff coming up, lots of awesome interviews coming up over the next few weeks. So keep in touch, and I'll see you guys again.
We hope you enjoyed the show.